The trauma bay is too quiet. Monitors glow. A ventilator hisses. Someone's shoes squeak once, then stop. On the security camera feed above the nurse's station, three men in maintenance coveralls walk in, wrong badges, wrong pace, eyes scanning like they own the place. One of them touches his belt like he's checking a weapon that isn't supposed to be there. Delta, the imaging tech everyone calls just a tech, keeps her face neutral as she wheels a portable machine past them. She doesn't run. She doesn't warn anyone out loud. She turns into a supply room, shuts the door softly, and opens the hospital radio with careful hands, like she's done it under pressure before. A second later, doors start to click. Elevators freeze. Hallways seal. And the men finally realize the building isn't a hospital anymore. It's a perimeter. And they misjudged who said it. The hospital runs on rhythm more than urgency. Monitors beep at measured intervals. Stretchers roll in straight lines. Voices stay low even when the waiting room is full. Delta moves through it like part of the infrastructure, present, necessary, unnoticed. She works imaging. CT, portable X-ray, whatever is needed. Her badge says imaging technician in plain black letters. People read it, then forget it. A resident snaps his fingers once as she passes. "Can you move that cart?" She stops, adjusts the angle of the machine so it clears the doorway, and keeps going. He doesn't say thank you. He already forgot her. At the nurse's station, a charge nurse talks over her while scanning a clipboard. "We're slammed. If it's not urgent, it waits." Delta nods. She always nods. She files the information anyway. Short-staffed security tonight, 2 callouts, 1 temp filling in. Noted. She wheels a portable unit down a hallway where one ceiling light flickers twice before stabilizing. A facilities issue, logged earlier in the week, still not fixed. Near the ambulance bay, a security door stands open longer than it should. The alarm doesn't sound. Someone taped the sensor, probably maintenance, probably. Delta pauses just long enough to look at the tape. Clean cut, fresh. A trauma alert comes over the PA, vehicle collision, unknown patient. ETA 3 minutes. The department tightens without panic. Gloves snap on. Curtains pull. Someone spills saline and swears under their breath. Delta parks the machine where it will be needed and waits. When the gurney comes in, she notices things before she notices the patient. 2 security officers instead of 1. Not hospital police contract. Hands too close to their belts, eyes not on the patient. The patient is sedated, face bruised, clothing cut away. A sealed evidence bag rests on his chest, clear plastic marked with a simple red stripe. No ID, no name. "Imaging ready," Delta says. No one answers her directly. They're already moving. She does her job, positions the plate, adjusts the arm. The image comes up clean enough for what they need. She steps back into the corner and becomes invisible again. While they work, she sees a small square of reflective film under the gurney rail. Too precise to be tape, too deliberate to be trash. She reaches down, peels it off, and slips it into her pocket without changing her expression. No one notices. Outside the bay, voices rise briefly, security asking questions, administration asking different ones. The words don't matter. The tone does. Delta wheels her machine back toward imaging storage. A man in a gray maintenance coverall steps aside to let her pass. His boots are clean, new soles, no dust. "Busy night," he says. "Yes," Delta replies. He watches her longer than necessary. In the break alcove, she washes her hands, counts to 20, dries them carefully. The radio mounted near the sink crackles with routine chatter, transport requests, dietary updates, a code brown on the 4th floor. Normal noise. She glances at the radio longer than she needs to. Then she turns away. As she exits the alcove, she hears raised voices near the elevator bank. The same man in gray is there now, talking to another in identical coveralls. They hold laminated badges at the wrong angle. They're asking about electrical access. A real maintenance worker shakes his head. "That wasn't on my list." The man smiles too quickly. Emergency override came down late. Delta slows her pace without stopping. She passes close enough to hear the cadence of their speech, controlled, practiced, not rushed. She files it away. At the nurse's station, a visitor mistakes her for transport and asks for directions. She gives them, clear and calm, pointing them away from the trauma wing. "Thank you," the visitor says. Delta nods and keeps moving. She reaches imaging storage and checks the door. Locked. Good. Inside, she parks the machine, aligns the cable and straightens the room the way she always does. She takes the reflective square from her pocket and turns it over in her palm. It's warm. Her radio crackles again. A security supervisor asks for confirmation on a door alarm that didn't trigger. Delta closes her locker, slowly. On the other side of the wall, she hears footsteps, measured, unhurried, heading deeper into the building. She doesn't run. She doesn't announce anything. She takes a breath, looks once more at the radio down the hall and starts walking toward it. The hospital keeps moving. For now. The radio sits where it always has, bolted to the wall outside imaging, its casing scratched from years of carts clipping the corner. Delta doesn't touch it yet. She stands a few feet away and listens. A request for transport to cardiology, a dietary complaint, security asking again about the door alarm near the ambulance bay. The supervisor's voice is steady, but there's a pause at the end of each sentence, like he's waiting for a detail he isn't getting. Delta turns and walks the long way back toward the trauma wing. She passes a camera dome above the corridor junction. The indicator light is dark. Not powered down, covered. A small circle of tape, the same clean cut she saw earlier. She keeps moving. At the nurse's station, a resident flips through imaging results and frowns. "Where's the repeat chest?" "Completed," Delta says. "Uploaded." He scrolls again, then nods without looking at her. "Okay." A unit clerk whispers that administration wants the trauma patient moved to ICU as soon as possible. "They're being weird about it," she adds. Security's hovering. Delta watches the elevator bank. One elevator is parked with the doors closed. The call button doesn't light when pressed. A temporary lockout, someone set it to service mode. "Who requested that?" Delta asks. The clerk shrugs. "Facilities?" Delta nods and steps away. Near the supply corridor, a man in gray coveralls opens a wall panel that should require a key. He doesn't have one out. His hands are bare. No gloves. "Power check," he says to no one in particular. A real electrician would have tagged the panel, logged the work, called it in. Delta turns into a patient room that's empty except for a folded blanket. She straightens it, then checks the whiteboard. The date is correct. The time is off by 7 minutes. She adjusts it. Across the hall, she hears the low click of a radio being keyed, short burst, then silence. Not the hospital channel, something else. She steps back into the corridor and sees a second man in gray at the far end, leaning casually against a crash cart, blocking the direct route to the trauma bay. His posture says waiting, not resting. Delta takes the side corridor instead. The trauma bay doors are closed now. Inside, staff work with the same efficiency as before, but the energy has shifted. Voices are tighter. A nurse checks the sealed evidence bag twice, then slides it closer to the patient's shoulder like it might drift away. A security officer stands too close to the head of the bed. Delta catches his eye. He looks past her. She finishes a task that doesn't need finishing and steps out again. At the stairwell, she checks the door. The magnetic lock releases normally. Good. At the next stairwell, it doesn't. She presses the bar harder. Nothing. A handwritten sign is taped to the door, temporarily out of service. No initials. No timestamp. Delta peels the sign off, folds it, and puts it in her pocket. She walks until she finds a quiet stretch of hallway and stops, closes her eyes for half a second. Counts her breathing. She thinks in lists. Security short-staffed. Unlogged maintenance. Camera coverage interrupted. Elevator controlled. Evidence patient unidentified. Reflective marker removed, likely a locator. This isn't panic, it's alignment. She returns to the nurse's station and lowers her voice. "Who signed the maintenance work order tonight?" The charge nurse shakes her head. "Facilities, I think we're busy. Can you check?" Delta asks. The nurse hesitates, then pulls up the system, scrolls again. "There's nothing here." Delta nods. "Okay." She doesn't say more. Down the corridor, one of the men in gray looks directly at her now. Not hostile, assessing. He steps into her path just enough to require a choice. "Restricted area," he says lightly. "We'll need you to reroute." Delta stops, meets his eyes. She keeps her tone even. "I'm imaging, I have clearance." He smiles. "Not right now." She considers the distance to the nearest turn, the angle of his shoulders, the way his left hand hovers near his belt, not reaching, just ready. She shifts the portable machine an inch to the side, creating space without confrontation. "Then I'll wait," she says. The pause stretches. Behind him, another gray coverall appears at the elevator bank. He gives a subtle nod. The first man steps aside. "Go ahead." Delta moves through without hurry. At the corner, she hears a whisper behind her, too quiet to be hospital routine. She doesn't turn around. She reaches the alcove near the radio again. This time, she stops in front of it. A security call comes through. "All units confirm perimeter integrity." No one answers immediately. Delta keys the mic halfway, just enough to listen. She switches to a secondary channel that isn't labeled, one most staff never use. The sound is clean, no static. She releases the button and steps back. Not yet. A nurse rushes past her, face pale. "They're moving the patient early," she says. "Admin wants it done now." "Which route?" Delta asks. "Elevator 3. Delta looks at the elevator bank. Elevator 3's indicator flickers, then goes dark. She exhales slowly. The men in gray start walking with purpose now. No more casual posture. One of them speaks into his sleeve. Delta turns toward the radio again. This time she rests her hand on it, still calm, still quiet. But the pattern has finished forming. And once a pattern is complete, delay stops being caution. The first thing that changes is the pace. The men in gray stop pretending to blend. Their steps lengthen. Corners get taken tighter. One of them keys his radio without bothering to turn away anymore. Delta notices because she is already watching. She releases the hospital radio and steps aside as a gurney rushes past, an elderly patient coughing behind an oxygen mask. She guides the bed through a choke point with one hand, her other resting lightly on the wall. When the corridor clears, she keeps walking. Same speed, same posture. At the elevator bank, elevator 3 opens halfway, then stops. A warning chime sounds once and dies. A facilities notice flashes on the screen, then disappears. A nurse presses the call button again. "Nothing." "Why isn't this moving?" The nurse asks, voice tight. "Service interruption," one of the gray coverall men answers from behind them. His tone is calm, practiced. "We'll reroute." The nurse turns to him automatically. Authority defaults to whoever speaks first with confidence. Delta doesn't intervene. She watches his badge instead. The laminate is clean, too clean. The hospital logo is slightly off-center, like it was printed from a cached image, not the current file. The expiration date is formatted wrong. He catches her looking and smiles. "Problem?" "No," Delta says. She steps back and gestures the nurse toward the stairwell. The one she knows still opens. "I'll walk you," she adds. The nurse hesitates, then nods. They move. Behind them, one of the men says quietly, "That tech's clocking us." The other answers, "She's nothing." Delta hears both. At the stairwell, the door opens on the first press. Delta holds it, lets the nurse and gurney pass, then follows. Halfway down, she stops at the landing. "Keep going," she tells the nurse. "Second floor connects to ICU. What about you?" "I forgot something." It's a lie. She doesn't sell it. She doesn't need to. She lets the door close behind her and listens. Footsteps above. 2 sets. Slower now. Delta turns and walks back up instead of down. In the hallway, she passes a real maintenance worker pushing a cart of tools. His shirt is stained with old paint. His hands are nicked and dry. "Did you call for help tonight?" She asks him low. He shakes his head immediately. "Nope, I'm solo." "Anyone ask you for access codes?" "No, why?" Delta nods once. "Thank you." She keeps moving. Near imaging storage, she sees one of the gray coverall men open a secondary electrical panel. He doesn't touch the breakers. He checks the inside of the door, then closes it again. He's mapping. Delta wheels a portable unit out of storage, not because it's needed but because it gives her reason to be there. The machine creates a barrier, a reason not to be touched. The man steps into her path again, this time closer. "Restricted," he says, voice polite but firm. "Then escort me," Delta replies. His eyebrows lift a fraction, not the response he expected. He gestures toward the corridor that leads away from trauma, away from ICU. Delta adjusts the machine's handle, angling it so its metal edge blocks a direct grab without looking like it's doing that. "After you," she says. He steps aside instead. They stand there for a moment, facing each other. Down the hall, another gray coverall man appears at the corner. He doesn't approach. He watches. This is the first real line. Delta breaks it by moving, not forward, not back, but sideways. She guides the machine past the first man with careful precision, close enough that he has to shift his stance. She doesn't bump him. She doesn't apologize. She keeps going. Behind her, she hears a sharp intake of breath. Anger restrained. At the nurse's station, voices rise. "They can't be in here without clearance," a unit clerk says. "We have clearance," a gray coverall man answers. "From downtown." "From where downtown?" the clerk asks. Silence. Too long. Delta stops at the edge of the station and sets the machine's brakes. She doesn't join the conversation. She watches the security guard instead. He's young, new. His eyes move between badges, not faces. One of the men steps closer to him, lowering his voice. "We're here to prevent something worse." That phrasing matters. Delta speaks then, calm and level. "Which department issued your badges?" All three men turn toward her. The closest one smiles again. "Facilities." "Facilities doesn't issue badges," Delta says. "HR does." The smile tightens. "Ma'am," he says, dropping the warmth, "step away." Delta looks at the security guard. "Check their names." The guard hesitates. Reaches for his radio. One of the men moves just a half step, but it's enough. Enough to show intent. Delta reacts by not reacting. She shifts her body between the guard and the man, using the machine as a shield. She doesn't push. She doesn't grab. She creates space and denies it at the same time. "Let him check," she says. The radio crackles. "Stand down," the man says quietly, not into the radio, into the guard's ear. That's the moment. Not the threat. Not the movement, the certainty. Delta looks past them, down the corridor toward the radio alcove. She knows now exactly what they're here for, and exactly how much time she has left before they stop pretending. She reaches for the machine's release lever and disengages it with a soft click. The hospital hums around them, unaware. The wrong badges have been seen, and the window for quiet correction is closing. The security guard's radio squawks once, then goes silent. He looks down at it like it betrayed him. The man in gray is still too close, close enough that the guard can smell his aftershave, clean and out of place. The man doesn't touch him. He doesn't need to. Delta adjusts the portable machine half an inch forward. Metal edge, weight centered. It becomes a boundary without looking like one. "Step back," she says to no one in particular. The man smiles again, but the warmth is gone. "This doesn't concern you." "It concerns the patients," Delta replies. Behind him, the other two are already repositioning. One drifts toward the corridor that leads to ICU. The other angles toward the stairwell. They are no longer improvising. They're dividing space. Delta doesn't raise her voice. She leans slightly toward the security guard. "Radio control, say the word audit." "What?" he whispers. "Say it," she repeats. Slowly, the man in gray hears enough to react. "We're done talking." He reaches not fast, not violent toward the machine, toward the lever that would let him swing it aside. Delta moves first, not aggressively, precisely. She releases the brake with her foot and rolls the machine forward just enough to force him to step back or collide. He chooses to step back. The corridor tightens. A nurse at the station gasps. Another freezes mid-chart. "Everyone stay where you are," Delta says, calm, steady. This is not a drill, this is a safety hold. The phrasing is deliberate, hospital language, no panic words. One of the men laughs quietly. "You think you're in charge?" "No," Delta says. "I think you're standing in the wrong place." The man near the ICU corridor keys his sleeve radio. Delta hears the click. She turns her head slightly, not to look at him but to project her voice down the hall. "Transport, hold position. Do not move the patient." A voice answers automatically. "Copy, holding." The man swears under his breath. That's the first crack. He moves toward Delta now, faster, irritation bleeding through control. "You need to." Delta steps sideways and back at the same time, drawing him just far enough from the others to break their spacing. The portable machine pivots with her, always between them. The security guard finds his voice. "Audit," he says into the radio. "I'm requesting an audit." The word lands like a pin. The man closest to Delta stills. His jaw tightens. "Cancel that," he says. The guard doesn't. His hand is shaking, but he keeps the button down. Down the corridor, a door clicks, then another. Delta hears it and adjusts. "Staff," she says, louder now, still calm. "Move visitors into patient rooms. Close doors, do not lock." The nurses respond immediately. They don't question it. They don't ask who she is. They move. The man by the stairwell lunges, not at Delta but at the guard's radio. Delta lets go of the machine. It rolls forward on its own momentum, clipping the man's knee hard enough to stop him, not hard enough to injure. He stumbles. Catches himself. Delta is already moving. She grabs the guard's wrist, not forcefully, just enough to guide, and pulls him behind the nurse's station. "Stay down," she tells him. "Keep transmitting." The man recovers fast, too fast. He reaches inside his jacket. Delta sees the shape before the weapon clears fabric. She doesn't shout. She steps into his space, not to fight but to block his line of draw. Her shoulder hits his forearm, redirecting it downward. The weapon stays concealed. The motion looks like an accident. "Not here," she says quietly. He looks at her then, really looks. Recognition flickers and something like respect. The other two move in. The hallway compresses. Voices rise from patient rooms. Someone starts to cry. Delta feels the weight of it settle. This is the moment where things tip. She raises one hand, palm out, not surrender, signal. "Stop," she says. "You're out of time." "According to who?" the first man asks. Delta glances past him toward the elevator bank. Elevator 3 dings. The doors open to an empty car, then they close again. The men freeze. They hadn't expected that. Delta keys the hospital radio for the first time fully. Her voice is steady, controlled. "Initiate sterile corridor protocol," she says. "Radiology to ICU, seal cross-traffic." There's a half-second pause, then the radio answers. "Confirmed." Doors begin to lock, not all at once, not dramatically. In sequence, controlled. The men in gray look around as the space changes around them. The hospital isn't panicking, it's reorganizing. The first man exhales slowly. "You're not just a tech." Delta doesn't answer. She steps back, reclaims the machine, and repositions it, this time not as a barrier but as a signal. The confrontation isn't over, but it's no longer theirs to control. The radio feels heavier than it should. Delta knows that isn't true. It's the same unit that's been on the wall for years, its casing dulled by disinfectant and fingerprints. But when she keys it now, she does it with both hands, steadying herself, grounding the moment. The men in gray don't rush her. They've learned enough not to. The corridor has changed shape. Doors that were open minutes ago are now closed. Not locked, just closed, the way hospital doors are when something sensitive is happening inside. Staff move quickly but without shouting. The sound level drops instead of rising. Delta speaks into the radio like she's dictating a chart. Sterile corridor is active. Treat as contamination control. No cross-traffic between radiology, ICU, or trauma. Acknowledge only. The response comes back clipped and professional. Acknowledged. She switches channels without looking, fingers moving on instinct. This channel isn't marked for general use. It's reserved for facilities' coordination and security overlap, rarely touched but always live. Security supervisor, she says. You're compromised at the ambulance bay, pull your people back and hold. A pause, then, copy pulling back. One of the men swears quietly. You don't have that authority, he says. Delta doesn't look at him. She watches the hallway instead, how staff instinctively reroute when they see doors closing, how a nurse pauses, then redirects a family down a side corridor without being told. Authority, she knows, is often just momentum. She keys the radio again. Facilities, I need elevator control transferred to contamination protocol. Car 3 stays empty, others cycle only on request. Facilities answers immediately. Confirmed. The man near the stairwell turns sharply. That's not facilities language. Delta finally meets his eyes. It is tonight. She releases the radio and steps away from the wall, putting space between herself and the device. If they're going to make a move, it will be now. They don't. Instead, they spread out again, slower this time, recalculating. One of them tests a door handle. It doesn't open. Another checks the stairwell, still locked. You're trapping yourself too, the first man says. You're on the wrong side of this. Delta nods once. I know. She moves down the corridor away from them, not because she's retreating, but because she's shaping the board. She stops near a nurse's alcove where two staff members are whispering. Stay here, she tells them quietly. If anyone asks, you're on isolation hold. They nod, grateful for the certainty. At the next intersection, she pauses and keys the radio again. Transport, relocate the trauma patient. Use the sterile corridor, do not announce destination. A beat, then copy. One of the men reacts immediately, turning toward the ICU wing. He moves fast now, abandoning subtlety. Delta watches him go. She keys another channel. Security, hold him. Nonviolent, delay only. The answer comes back with strain in it. We'll try. Delta exhales through her nose. This is the cost part. She knows every delay she creates puts someone else closer to harm. She also knows that letting these men reach the patient would be worse. She keeps moving. At the far end of the corridor, she ducks into a supply room, not the one with the radio, but another, smaller, overlooked. Inside, she closes the door and listens. Footsteps pass. Voices argue in low tones. A door slams somewhere distant. She opens a wall panel and checks the wiring, not to cut anything, just to confirm what's live. She notes it, then closes the panel again. When she steps back into the hallway, the atmosphere has shifted again. Security officers are visible now, positioned but not advancing. Staff stay behind doors. The men in gray are contained to a shrinking zone, their movement constrained by locked paths and redirected traffic. Delta returns to the radio alcove. One of the men stands there now, closer than before, hands empty and visible. You're good, he says quietly. I'll give you that. Delta doesn't respond. He tilts his head. But you're bleeding time. Someone's coming for what's in this building, and it's not us. She looks at him then. Then you picked the wrong night. He studies her for a long moment. What are you? Delta keys the radio again instead of answering. Perimeter status, she says. A voice she doesn't recognize answers this time. Older, calmer. Perimeter locked. External assets en route. The man's expression changes, just a flicker. He steps back. Delta releases the radio and lets her hand rest on the wall. She feels the vibration of the building through it, the hum of systems working the way they're supposed to. The crisis hasn't ended, but the shape of it is no longer theirs. And for the first time since the pattern formed, Delta allows herself a single thought she's been avoiding. If this goes wrong, she won't be able to disappear afterward. She sets that aside and keys the radio one more time. Maintain isolation, she says. We're holding. The hospital tightens another notch. Not with alarms, not with shouting, with absence. The corridors around the men in gray empty first, patients already moved, staff redirected under the language of isolation and workflow adjustment. What remains is quiet space, long sightlines and doors that no longer open the way they should. Delta feels it before she sees it, a change in pressure, in movement, in how sound carries. One of the men tests a fire door again, harder this time. It doesn't give. He slams his palm against it once in frustration, then stills when the echo carries farther than he expected. You're running out of options, Delta says, not to threaten but to state fact. You think you are, he replies. He turns and gestures down the hall. A nurse stands frozen halfway between rooms, her badge twisted in her shaking fingers. One of the men has positioned himself just close enough to her that she can't move without brushing past him. Not touching. Not yet. Delta's jaw tightens. She steps forward, slow and visible, hands open. Let her go. She walks, the man says. We walk. Delta considers the distance, the angles, the timing. She could create a distraction. She could close another door and force separation. But the nurse would be caught in it. Delta shifts tactics. Ma'am, she says to the nurse, her voice steady, turn around, go back into the room behind you, close the door, sit on the bed. The nurse hesitates, the man smiles. She doesn't listen to you. Delta doesn't look at him. She will. The nurse swallows and does exactly as she's told. The door closes softly behind her. The man curses under his breath. That was your leverage, Delta says. You won't get another. The men change formation again. They stop trying doors randomly and start moving with purpose toward infrastructure. Oxygen access panels, emergency power nodes, places where disruption creates leverage without blood. Delta keys the radio. Facilities confirm oxygen shutoff valves remain locked. Confirmed, comes the reply, tight but controlled. A shout echoes from down the hall. A security officer stumbles backward, catching himself on a wall. He's bleeding from the eyebrow, not badly, but enough to shake him. Delta watches it happen from too far away. This is the cost she knew was coming. She moves, fast now, but not running, cutting through a side corridor to intercept. She positions herself between the injured officer and the nearest man in gray, raising a hand. Enough, she says. The man's breathing is heavier now, sweat beads at his temple. The calm mask is cracking. You're good at this, he says, but you're alone. Delta glances past him. Two security officers are repositioning, hands shaking but steadying. A nurse peeks through a cracked door, eyes wide. No, Delta says, I'm not. One of the men makes a sudden decision. He bolts toward a secondary stairwell, the one Delta hasn't sealed yet, not because she forgot, but because she wanted to see who would take it. Delta keys the radio as she turns. Seal stairwell B, delay only. Copy, comes the answer, immediate. The stairwell door slams shut just as the man reaches it. He hits its shoulder first and staggers back, pain flashing across his face. For a moment, Delta has him. He's off balance, disoriented. If she moves now, she could end it, pin him, hold him, force compliance before the others can react. She doesn't. Instead, she steps back and raises her hand again. Sit down, she says. Now, he laughs, breathless. You won't do it. Delta meets his eyes. I don't need to. Behind him, the corridor lights flicker once, then stabilize as emergency power routes adjust. Doors remain sealed. The building holds. Another voice comes over the radio, strained, apologetic. Delta, we've got a nurse down. She tripped during relocation. Broken wrist. Delta closes her eyes for half a second, then she answers. Is she breathing? Yes. Is she safe? Yes. Then stay with her. She opens her eyes again and looks at the men. You're done, she says quietly. Every move you make now costs someone else. Not me, not you, them. One of the men looks away. The first one doesn't. He takes a step toward her. Delta doesn't retreat. She stands there calm, grounded, letting the moment stretch, letting him feel the weight of the choice he's about to make. Sirens sound faintly now, not inside the hospital but outside, distant, approaching. The man exhales sharply and steps back. Delta doesn't relax. She knows better. Because escalation never announces its last move. The sound of sirens grows closer, but it doesn't calm anything. It sharpens it. The men in gray hear it too. Delta sees the change in their posture, the shift from confidence to calculation. They know help is coming, but they don't know for whom. One of them looks at the ceiling, then at the oxygen panel set into the wall a few yards away. It's a small movement, easy to miss. Delta doesn't miss it. She moves before he does, positioning herself so her body blocks the panel without making it obvious. She rests her hand against the wall, casual, like she's just steadying herself. "You touch that," she says evenly, "and the response won't be mine." The man studies her. "You're bluffing." Delta shakes her head once. No, he believes her, not because of what she says, but because of what she hasn't done yet. He gestures toward the sealed corridor that leads to ICU. "You moved the patient." "Yes." "Where?" "That's not your problem anymore." A tense silence stretches. The building hums around them, air handlers cycling, emergency power stable, systems doing exactly what they were designed to do. One of the men sits down slowly against the wall. His shoulders sag just a fraction. Fatigue is catching him. The others don't follow. Delta keys the radio softly. "Status." "External team staged," comes the reply. "Waiting on your call." Delta closes her eyes for a breath. This is the point where violence would be efficient. This is where she could let someone else come in hard, end it quickly, justify every bruise with what might have happened if they hadn't. She does. "Hold," she says into the radio. "No entry yet." There's a pause, then, "Understood." The nearest man laughs once, sharp and bitter. "Why?" Delta looks at him. "Because this is still a hospital." He shakes his head. "You could have shut us down 10 minutes ago." "Yes. So why didn't you?" Delta thinks of the nurse with the broken wrist, the security guard bleeding into gauze, the patients who will never know how close this came to tearing through their rooms. "Because the fastest way isn't always the cleanest," she says. The man stares at her, searching for something, anger, ego, a crack he can exploit. He doesn't find it. Instead, he sees restraint. That unsettles him more than force would have. Another siren passes close now. Tires crunch on gravel outside. Doors somewhere at ground level open and close with purpose. The men shift again, but this time it's not toward escape. It's toward surrender, partial, reluctant, unspoken. Delta steps back, giving them space without giving them freedom. "Sit," she says again. This time 2 of them do. The last one hesitates, jaw tight, eyes still burning with defiance. He looks at Delta like he wants her to be something else, angrier, louder, more obvious. She is. He exhales and lowers himself to the floor. Delta keys the radio one final time. "Send them in. Quiet." "Copy." She releases the button and steps aside, letting the wall support her weight for just a second longer than necessary. Her legs feel heavy now. The adrenaline is draining. She watches as the external team enters the corridor, plain clothes, calm movements, no dramatic commands. They take control with efficiency that mirrors her own. One of them pauses as he passes Delta. He doesn't salute. He doesn't thank her. He says quietly, "Good containment." Delta nods once. Nothing more is needed. The men in gray are led away, one by one, heads down, wrists restrained. No one is slammed against a wall. No one shouts. The corridor breathes again. Delta straightens, smooths the front of her scrubs, and turns away before anyone can start asking questions she doesn't want to answer. The line was there. She saw it, and she chose not to cross it. The men are gone, but the perimeter stays locked. Delta insists on it. She stands just outside the trauma wing as the last restrained figure disappears down the corridor with the external team. Their footsteps fade, but the building doesn't relax. Not yet. Hospitals remember danger longer than people do. Hold positions, she says into the radio. No reset until full sweep. Understood, comes the reply. She moves through the corridor at a measured pace, checking what she already knows, doors sealed in sequence, stairwells controlled, elevators cycling clean. She doesn't touch anything she doesn't have to. She just verifies. At ICU, a charge nurse meets her eyes through the glass. The trauma patient lies 2 rooms down, relocated quietly, monitors steady. The sealed evidence bag now rests in a locked cabinet bolted to the wall, watched by 2 security officers who didn't arrive with the men in gray. The nurse mouths, "Thank you." Delta nods once and keeps moving. The external team fans out, efficient and quiet, confirming what Delta has already shaped. One of them speaks softly into a headset, relaying status without urgency. Perimeter held, no breach, patient secure. Delta hears it and exhales, slow. A facilities supervisor approaches her near the elevator bank, confusion written across his face. "We had systems overriding themselves," he says. "Who authorized?" Delta cuts him off gently. "Contamination protocol, temporary." He blinks. "But there was no." "It's resolved," she says. He looks like he wants to argue. Then he notices the sealed corridors, the presence of unfamiliar personnel, the stillness that doesn't belong to routine operations. "Okay," he says finally. "I'll document." Delta gives him a small nod and steps away. She reaches the radio alcove again and rests her hand on the wall beside it. The casing hums faintly. She keys the mic. "Begin phased release," she says. "Start with non-critical corridors. ICU remains isolated. Copy. Doors unlock in order. Elevators resume normal cycling." The building exhales. A security supervisor approaches her, eyes tired, voice low. "We didn't see it," he says. "Any of it?" Delta meets his gaze. "You responded when it mattered." He nods, grateful for the absolution. Down the hall, the nurse with the broken wrist is being stabilized, joking weakly with a colleague. Delta watches from a distance, making sure she's okay without inserting herself. This is how it ends, not with triumph but with quiet accounting. One of the external team members approaches again, this time slower. He stops to her side, not facing her directly. "They were after the patient," he says, "or what he was carrying." "Yes," Delta replies. "You moved him early, cleanly." "Yes." He waits, then adds, "You want this noted?" Delta considers the question. The implications ripple outward, reports, inquiries, attention that would follow her long after tonight. "No," she says. "Document the protocols, not the person." He studies her profile for a moment. "That's not how it usually works." "I know." He nods once and walks away. The perimeter is officially released. Staff begin to re-emerge, voices rising back to normal levels. The hospital resumes its rhythm, altered but intact. Delta returns the portable machine to storage, aligns the cable, locks the wheels. She checks the room once more before turning off the light. In the locker room, she washes her hands longer than required. The water runs warm, steady. She dries them carefully, like earlier, like routine still matters. As she steps back into the hallway, a plainclothes figure waits near the exit. Older, calm, the kind of presence that doesn't demand attention but absorbs it anyway. He doesn't stop her. He walks alongside her for a few steps. "You handled that like you've done it before," he says quietly. Delta keeps her eyes forward. "Hospitals train you for emergencies." He smiles faintly. "Not like that." They walk in silence until they reach the main corridor. "You could have made this very visible," he says. "You didn't." That was the point. He stops walking. Delta doesn't. "Perimeter's clear," he says. "Good work." She nods without turning around. By the time she reaches the exit, he's already gone. Outside, the night air is cool. Sirens fade into distance. The city continues unaware. Delta adjusts her jacket, tucks her badge into her pocket, and walks to her car like she always does, unremarkable, unnoticed. Tomorrow she'll be back in imaging. Just a tech. The hospital will remember the perimeter. and she will carry the rest quietly, the way she always has.